My sisters accused me of trying to drown my nephews. I just stepped aside when they tried to push me in the pool. My family has this very specific talent for turning something stupid into the kind of drama people whisper about for years. And that barbecue at my parents' place is the one that still makes my chest tighten every time I smell chlorine or hear kids screaming near a pool. It was supposed to be a simple weekend thing. Burgers and hot dogs and the usual fake family bonding. My husband and I almost did not go, honestly. But my mother had done that sad little voice on the phone about, "We hardly see you anymore," and I caved like I always did back then. So we showed up with a bowl of pasta salad and a store-bought pie, already braced for my sisters to be at least halfway drunk before the grill even got hot. By the time we walked through the side gate into the backyard, both my sisters were exactly as I imagined. Loud, sunburned, drinks in hand, talking over each other while their husbands laughed way too hard at everything. The kids, my 3 nephews, were running around the pool in those slippery water shoes that are definitely not as safe as people pretend, screaming and shoving each other while the music from a little speaker fought with the noise of the neighborhood. My father was at the grill sweating through his shirt, turning hot dogs like they were some kind of mission, and my mother was parked in a lawn chair near the shade, pretending she was just keeping an eye on things, while really supervising nothing. I tried to settle in and do the normal daughter thing. I hugged my parents, said hi to my sisters, and did that awkward wave at the in-laws like we were all one big, happy sitcom family. My husband squeezed my hand under the table once we sat down. That little warning squeeze that meant, "Behave, please. Not today." To be fair, I was trying. I had promised myself I was not going to rise to any bait. I was going to eat, smile, leave early, and go home to our quiet little apartment where nobody screamed about who got the bigger slice of cake. The first sign the day was going off the rails was the neighbor. She lived 2 houses down from my parents and had one of those polite but slightly exhausted relationships with them. She came over in a sundress carrying a bowl of something with marshmallows in it, probably because my mother had guilted her into bringing a dish. She said hi to everyone, set the bowl on the table, and was halfway to a chair when my nephews suddenly decided it would be hilarious to push her into the pool. They were behind her, whispering and giggling, doing that thing where kids think they are being subtle but everyone can see them. My sisters were already giggling, phones out, ready to film the prank, like it was quality entertainment. I watched my nephews line up behind the neighbor with this awful sinking feeling, because I know my nephews. They are not gentle pushers. They are full-throttle chaos in sneakers. They rushed her all at once, 3 bodies in swim trunks crashing into the back of a woman in a sundress and sandals. She staggered toward the pool, flailing her arms, and at the last second she twisted just enough that they kind of slid past her and almost took themselves in instead. One of them grabbed her arm and she nearly went in anyway, shoes skidding on wet concrete. Water splashed everywhere. Her sunglasses flew off. She ended up half-soaked and definitely not amused. My sisters? They laughed. They laughed so hard one of them almost dropped her drink. The husbands were cackling, telling the boys they were little monsters, in that tone that means, "We are actually proud of you." Nobody apologized. Nobody said, "Hey, that was not cool, maybe do not assault the neighbor." The neighbor forced a tight smile, grabbed a towel, and sat there shivering for a while, before finally saying she needed to go check on something at home. She left early, still damp, still polite, and I felt this weird secondhand embarrassment just watching her walk away. I should have taken that as my cue to leave too. I really should have. Instead, I stayed, because I did not want to start a fight, and also because my mother had already made a big deal about everyone being together. So I told myself to breathe, to let it go, to focus on the potato salad and ignore the red flags throwing a parade around the pool. It did not take long for the boys to get bored with each other and decide they needed a new target. That is when I saw one of them whisper something to the others, and then all 3 of them looked at me like I was a cartoon villain they were about to defeat with slapstick. I knew that look. I grew up with that look in different faces. "Do not even think about it," I said, pointing at them while I stood near the shallow end, talking to my husband. They grinned like little demons, all baby teeth and trouble. They started creeping toward me, still pretending they were just playing, but the way they spread out told me exactly what they were planning. Behind them, my sisters had their phones out again, already recording, already shrieking with laughter, like the idea of their kids pushing a grown woman fully dressed into a concrete hole filled with water was peak comedy. "You better not," I said again, louder this time. "I am serious." They came at me anyway, all 3 of them running as fast as their little legs could go, heads down like they were playing football. I had a split second to decide between being shoved backward into the deep end or giving them a taste of their own chaos. So I stepped aside at the last second and they shot past me like little torpedoes. They did not stop in time. All three of them went straight into the pool, fully dressed in their little matching swim shorts, holding their precious phones up like they were sacred artifacts. There was this giant splash, and then the phones disappeared under the water too. For half a heartbeat, the entire backyard went silent. Then everybody started screaming. My sisters were the loudest, obviously. They were shrieking about how their babies could not swim, how they were going to drown, how I had pushed them, how I had tried to kill their children, which, first of all, the kids go to that pool constantly. They take swim lessons. They have literally jumped off the deep end with floaties since they were tiny. Second, they were in the shallow end, standing up with water up to their chests, sputtering and laughing and trying to grab their phones. No one was drowning. No one was even close. My husband and my father were already helping the boys up the pool steps, while my sisters stood there wailing like a soap opera, completely ignoring the fact that their kids were upright and breathing and mostly upset about their ruined electronics. "You push them!" My older sister screamed at me, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You could have killed them!" "I did not touch them," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "They tried to push me. I moved. They fell in. That is it." My other sister jumped in, yelling about how two of the boys barely know how to swim, and how they could have slipped under and hit their heads, and how I was reckless and cruel and a monster. Yes, she actually used that word. My mother started crying, my father was shouting for everyone to calm down, and my nephews were crying over their drowned phones. It was one of those scenes where everyone is talking at the same time and no one is actually listening. My sisters got louder and louder, circling back to, "You almost killed our kids," like it was a story they kept repeating. One of the husbands was yelling that the phones cost a lot of money and somebody better pay for that. It was like watching a fire you did not start burn down your whole life in slow motion. My husband stepped in front of me, hands up, and told them to stop yelling at me. That just made them turn on him too, calling him weak, saying he always takes my side. Like that is not what spouses are supposed to do. My father tried to play referee, but the damage was done. I felt my face burning, my heart racing, that awful shaking feeling you get when everything is too much and you cannot decide if you want to scream or start sobbing. So I did the only thing that made any sense in that moment. "We are leaving," I said, quietly but very clearly. "Now." My older sister made some sarcastic comment about how, of course, I was running away after what I had done. My other sister yelled something about me being banned from seeing their kids. One of the husbands shouted after us that we owed them for the phones and he would not forget this. My mother was calling my name in that broken little voice again. But at that point, I was one more accusation away from breaking down in front of everyone, and I refused to give them that. My husband grabbed our stuff, I put the stupid pie back in its container like some kind of reflex, and we walked out while the yelling kept going behind us. It felt like leaving a crime scene, even though the only crime was that I had refused to be shoved into a pool like a prop. In the car, I finally let myself cry. Not the pretty single tear down the cheek kind of crying either. The ugly, hiccuping, snotty, cannot catch your breath kind. My husband drove with one hand and kept reaching over to squeeze my knee with the other, repeating that he had seen everything, that I had done nothing wrong, that the kids were fine, that this was about them, not me. I knew he was right logically, but logic does not do much when your own family has just labeled you a danger to children. By the time we got home, I had this dull, buzzing headache and that hollow feeling in my chest like something had cracked open. I showered, sat on the couch in clean pajamas, and stared at my phone on the coffee table like it was a bomb I did not want to touch. I knew the messages were coming. I knew that group chat was going to be a disaster. I still was not prepared for how bad it would get. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before I even had coffee. My mother called first. I almost ignored it, but guilt is a powerful thing, so I answered. She sounded exhausted, older than she had the week before, like the barbecue had aged her 10 years overnight. "I talked to your father," she said, skipping hello completely. "He said the boys go in the pool all the time. They know how to swim. You know that, right?" "Yes," I said. "I have eyes. They were fine. And that neighbor," she added, dropping her voice like the walls could hear her. "She came by this morning. She said the boys tried to push her first and that she almost fell in too. She apologized to me. Can you imagine? She apologized." I closed my eyes. "So they know the kids started it." "They know," my mother said. "They just will not admit it. Your father told them last night they were being ridiculous. One of the husbands was so drunk he fell on the patio and had to get stitches at urgent care after you left. Your sisters are calling him a hero for saving the boys from the pool, but your father said he tripped over his own feet. I could not even be surprised. Of course, they had turned that into a heroic story. Before I could answer, my phone chimed with a new notification. Then another, then another. I pulled it away from my ear and saw the new family group chat name at the top of my screen. It was some fake positive thing like Family First, which was almost funny if it had not been so disgusting. I have to go, I told my mother. I will call you later. She sighed, the long-suffering mother sigh I have heard since childhood. Please do not fight with them, she said. Just be careful what you say. Your father and I cannot take much more yelling. After we hung up, I opened the group chat like an idiot. They had already been talking for a while. My two sisters and their husbands typing novels about how I had endangered innocent kids and how I had stormed off like a guilty person. According to them, I had shoved their children into the pool on purpose, laughed while they struggled, refused to help, and then played the victim when called out. They were using those exact phrases. I wish I was exaggerating. One of the husbands had written this long paragraph about the trauma the boys would carry forever, how they had nightmares last night, how they were afraid of pools now. Spoiler, that ended up being a very short phase. Then he dropped the real point. All three boys had brand new phones, apparently very expensive, and since I had caused the incident, I was responsible for replacing them. He even put a total dollar amount at the bottom like he was sending me an invoice. I stared at the number on the screen. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Part of me wanted to send a voice note screaming. Another part wanted to throw my phone in the trash and walk away from all of them forever. Instead, I took screenshots. Every single message, every accusation, every insult. I saved them in a separate folder labeled Evidence, which should tell you exactly how quickly this whole thing stopped feeling like a family argument and started feeling like a case file. My husband came into the kitchen while I was still scrolling. He leaned over my shoulder, read for about 10 seconds, and then shook his head in that way that means, absolutely not. You are not answering that, he said. Block them. I cannot block my own sisters, I said automatically, even though that was exactly what I wanted to do. Watch me, he said. He did not grab my phone, but he did stand there while I muted the group chat first, then blocked both of my sisters and their husbands individually. It felt dramatic and petty and also incredibly necessary. I left my parents unblocked, and that was it. Suddenly, my phone was quiet again, and the silence felt both peaceful and like the moment before a thunderstorm hits. Later that day, my parents called again and asked if we would come over that evening. We need to talk as a family, my father said, in that tone he only used when things were serious, like the time he told us he was selling the old car or when he confessed he had lost his job many years ago. I knew this was going to be bad, but I agreed. Because of course I did. Walking into their house that night felt like stepping into a courtroom. My sisters were already there, sitting on opposite sides of the living room like dramatic actresses in a play, arms crossed, faces tight. Their husbands were there too, flanking them like backup dancers. My parents were in the middle, my mother clutching a tissue, my father with his jaw set. We are not going to yell, my father said before anyone could start. We are going to talk like adults. That lasted about 30 seconds. My older sister launched into her monologue first. She repeated the same story from the group chat, word for word almost, except now there were tears on her face and dramatic pauses for emphasis. She said I had pushed the kids. She said I had laughed. She said I had walked away while they struggled in the water. She looked at our parents after every sentence like she was collecting sympathy points. When she finally took a breath, I told the truth. I said the boys had tried to push the neighbor first. I said they had then tried to push me. I said I had stepped aside. I said they had fallen in the shallow end where they could stand. I said they had been more upset about their phones than anything else. I did not raise my voice. I did not throw accusations. I just told it straight. My younger sister rolled her eyes and said I always twist things and play innocent. Her husband asked again about the phones, saying that if I was not going to admit guilt, the least I could do was do the right thing financially. My father cut in then, voice sharp. Nobody is paying for phones tonight, he said. No one is writing anyone a check. This is outrageous. My mother, bless her tired heart, tried to mediate. She asked me if I would apologize for the misunderstanding, which made me want to scream, because apologizing for something I did not do has been my entire role in this family since childhood. I swallowed the anger and said I was sorry the kids got scared. I said I was glad they were okay. I said I never wanted anyone to get hurt. It was not enough, obviously, It never is. They pushed, they prodded, they tried to get a confession, they threw out words like irresponsible and unstable. When they saw they were not going to get exactly what they wanted, they shifted gears. They said they would be the bigger people and move on, but there was this coldness in their eyes that told me they were not dropping anything. They were regrouping. We left that night feeling like we had just survived a very uncomfortable performance review at a job we really did not want anymore. My husband told me he was proud of how calm I had been. I told him I wanted to throw up. We both knew this was not over, even though my parents were desperate to pretend it was. The thing about my sisters is they do not just have an argument and let it go. They build a story. They cast themselves as the victims, rehearse their lines, and then perform them for every single person who will listen. I had seen them do it to ex-friends, to former bosses, to neighbors they had fallen out with. I just never thought I would be the one in the lead role of their tragedy play. It started a few days later, small at first. A friend from church sent me a message asking if I was okay, because they had heard something happened with the kids at your parents' house. I brushed it off. Said, "We had a misunderstanding at a barbecue, but everyone is fine." I tried to keep it vague, because I still had this pathetic hope that my sisters would calm down if I did not feed the fire. Then I started seeing the posts. They were on one of those community groups on a social media app, the kind that is supposed to be about lost pets and yard sales, but turns into a gossip board within 5 minutes. My sisters did not use my name, but they did not have to. They wrote long posts about a relative who had pushed children into a pool on purpose and laughed while they struggled to breathe. They wrote about how traumatized their kids were, how they woke up screaming from nightmares, how they were now afraid of water. They wrote about a certain aunt who had always been emotionally unstable and jealous of moms. People commented. Of course they did. They left angry face emojis and said things like, "Some people should never be around kids," and "Call the police next time." They suggested therapy for the children. They offered prayers. My sisters lapped it up, replying with heart emojis and, "Thank you, we are doing our best to protect them," like they were saints. It did not stop there. They took it to a group for parents at their kids' school. They slid their story into conversations with other mothers at the playground. Suddenly, there were sideways looks when I showed up at my parents' house, when people from our shared community saw me at the grocery store. I overheard someone at church murmuring about that aunt who almost drowned her nephews, and I swear I felt my stomach drop like I had been punched. My husband, who is usually the calm one, started to get that tight jaw I have only seen a handful of times. One evening, he sat at the kitchen table with my phone, scrolling through screenshots I had taken of the posts and comments. "This is defamation," he said very quietly. "They are lying. They are naming you without naming you." "I know," I said, rubbing my temples. "I know. We need to save everything," he said. "Every single thing." So we did. We took screenshots of their posts, their comments, the messages people sent me asking what was going on. We saved the texts where they repeated the same story. We even saved the one message from our cousin saying she did not believe them because she had seen my nephews in the deep end of the pool the week before, like it was nothing. I wanted to believe collecting evidence would give me some sense of control, but it really just made me realize how fast a lie can move compared to the truth. By the time I even considered responding publicly, their version had already grown legs and a personality. I thought that was as bad as it would get. I was wrong. One afternoon, a woman from my job's human resources office asked if I had a few minutes. My stomach dropped in that very specific way it does when you know something ugly is coming. I followed her into a small conference room, sat down, and watched as she folded her hands on top of a folder with my name on it. "So," she said in that neutral human resources tone, "we received a phone call this morning from someone who identified herself as a family member of yours. She expressed concern about your behavior around children and mentioned an incident at a pool." I felt my face go hot. "Are you serious?" I asked. "They called here?" She did not give many details, she continued carefully, but she used phrases like unstable and violent outbursts. She implied you might not be safe to work around families. "We are required to document the call." I wanted to crawl under the table. I work in an office at a medical clinic, mostly doing scheduling and paperwork. I am not alone with patients. I am not a nurse. I am not a doctor. But that is not the point. The point is, my sister picked up the phone, called my workplace, and tried to sabotage the one area of my life she did not have her hands on yet. I explained what happened as calmly as I could. I told the human resources woman that my nephews had tried to push me into a pool, that they fell in instead, that they were fine, that I was being punished for not letting myself be humiliated. I admitted, because there was no point lying, that my relationship with my sisters had always been tense, that they had a flair for drama. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. She listened, nodded, and finally said, "We are not taking any action based on this. Your record here is solid. We just needed to make you aware and document the call." I thanked her, walked back to my desk, and then sat in the bathroom for 10 minutes, shaking in a stall. I did not cry. I was past crying by then. I was at that numb stage where your body is so tired of reacting that it just shuts down. A few days after that, one of my brothers-in-law showed up at my house. He did not call first. He just knocked, hard, like he was the landlord. When I opened the door and saw him standing there with his arms crossed, my first instinct was to shut it in his face. But I also did not want him causing a scene on my porch for the neighbors to watch through their curtains, so I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" I asked, even though I knew. "The phones," he said. "You have not sent us any money. Those were not cheap toys. The boys lost everything because of you." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was just so ridiculous. "They lost everything because they tried to push people into a pool and no one stopped them," I said. "I did not touch them. I do not owe you anything." He stepped closer, crowding my space. "You owe us," he said, low. "And if you do not pay, we will take care of it another way." "Are you threatening me on my own doorstep?" I asked, my heart hammering, but my mouth apparently fully committed to the bit. He smirked. "Take it however you want." That was when my husband came outside. He had his phone in his hand, the camera already open. He did not say much, just told my brother-in-law that if he did not leave right now, we would be calling the police and sending the video of him showing up at our house making threats. Suddenly, the guy remembered he had somewhere else to be. He muttered something about "not worth it" and walked away. We saved that video too. We never had to use it, but just having it made me feel less helpless. By that point, my entire life felt like a case file waiting to be presented to someone in a courtroom that did not exist yet. I could not go to church without feeling eyes on me. I could not visit my parents' neighborhood without worrying about who had heard what version of the story. I started avoiding places where I might run into other people from our community, which meant I was basically living at work and home like a very boring outlaw. The funny thing, and by funny I mean tragic and exhausting, is that the people who actually deserved to feel ashamed were sleeping just fine at night. My sisters were living their lives, posting selfies with their kids, sharing inspirational quotes about protecting your peace and choosing your family, like they had not just tried to blow up mine completely. If the story had stayed just about the pool, maybe it would have eventually burned itself out. People get bored, new gossip shows up. But my sisters had a talent for escalation, and they were not done. The next shift came at a family dinner that was supposed to be about healing. I already knew better than to trust those words. But my parents begged us to come. They said they did not want holidays to be ruined, that they were too old for all this fighting, that they wanted their daughters in the same room without a disaster. So we went. I put on a nice sweater and a mask of neutrality and walked back into the same house where the barbecue had gone up in flames. My sisters were already there when we arrived, sitting stiffly at the table, pretending to scroll their phones while definitely keeping track of every move we made. My mother had cooked too much food, like always. My father poured everyone drinks, non-alcoholic this time, which told me he was serious about avoiding another train wreck. We sat down, and for the first 10 minutes, it almost felt okay. We talked about the weather, about a show my parents were watching, about the neighbor's dog. Then my older sister leaned back in her chair, looked right at me, and launched the next phase of her campaign. "This is not really about the pool," she said, voice sweet but eyes sharp. "This is about how you have always been the favorite." I actually laughed at first, because it was so off the usual pattern. "What? You know it is true," my younger sister added, jumping in like they had rehearsed this. "You always got everything. Attention, praise, opportunities." My father frowned. "That is not fair," he said. "We treated all of you the same." They both rolled their eyes in perfect sync. Then they started listing examples. Except their examples were bizarre. According to them, me getting a scholarship for college meant I was given more chance than they were, even though they had turned down tutoring and never applied for anything. Me staying home with my parents for a couple of years after graduation while I looked for work was somehow proof that I was coddled, even though I was paying rent, buying groceries, and helping with bills. They reframed every choice I had made to take care of myself or our parents as evidence that I had been spoiled. And now, my older sister said, leaning forward. You are cozying up to them in their old age so you can make sure you get everything when they are gone. I stared at her. Everything like what? I asked. They do not have some secret fortune hidden in the walls. What are you even talking about? The house, my younger sister snapped. The accounts, the retirement. Do not act stupid. My mother looked like she might actually pass out. My father's face had gone a shade of red I did not like. That is enough, he said, voice shaking. We are not talking about inheritance tonight. That is exactly what we are talking about, my older sister insisted. You think we do not notice who is here all the time? Who goes to the doctors with you? Who knows all the passwords and bill details? You mean the daughter who actually shows up? My husband said, before I could stop him. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. The one who helps with hospital visits and fills out forms and makes sure the house insurance is paid on time? That daughter? My sisters both turned on him like a pair of synchronized vultures. They called him disrespectful. They said he should stay out of family matters. They threw around words like manipulation and gold digger, which was hilarious because we live in a small rental and drive one decent car, while they are the ones constantly posting pictures from expensive vacations. The dinner ended with my sisters storming out, saying things like, the truth will come out soon, and we are not going to let you steal our future. My mother cried. My father apologized for them, even though he should not have had to. I went home feeling like I had just been accused of a crime I had not even considered committing. After that night, things shifted from hurtful to dangerous in a way I do not think my parents fully understood at first. My sisters realized they could not guilt me into paying for phones or confessing to attempted child murder, so they went for the nuclear option, the grandchildren. They started saying things like, we do not feel comfortable bringing the boys around while she is there, and if you keep taking her side, we are going to have to limit visits. At first it was subtle. They would cancel plans last minute. They would forget to bring the kids over on the usual days. Then one of them left a voicemail on my parents' landline that made my blood run cold when my father played it on speaker for us. If you keep defending her, my sister's voice said, shaking with rehearsed rage, we will not bring the boys around anymore. We are not going to expose them to that kind of instability. You need to choose. Either you support your grandkids or you support that snake who almost killed them. She actually called me a snake. On a voicemail. I heard my mother sniffle in the background of the living room as it played. My father's hands were clenched on the arm of his chair. My other sister sent a series of texts saying they needed to reevaluate the testaments because people who hurt children and manipulate elderly parents do not deserve to inherit from this family. She said things like, we love you, but we have to protect ourselves, which is code for, we are about to emotionally blackmail you into submission. My husband told me again to cut them off completely. They are not going to stop, he said. They are only going to escalate. Protect yourself. I cannot just abandon my parents, I said. They are in the middle of this. They are already sick from stress. He did not argue with that because it was true. My mother had started having headaches and dizzy spells. My father was waking up in the middle of the night with chest pain that turned out to be anxiety. Not a heart attack, but still. Every time I went over there, they looked more tired, more defeated. So I did the thing I should have done much earlier. I stopped responding to my sisters entirely. I did not answer their calls, their texts, their emails. I did not engage with them in group chats. If they showed up at my parents' house while I was there, I left. I made my world smaller on purpose, not because I wanted to, but because they had turned every shared space into a battlefield. At the same time, I started getting organized. If they were going to keep throwing accusations, I was going to have more than just my word to stand on. I reached out to the neighbor who had almost been pushed into the pool, the one from the barbecue. I apologized again for what happened and asked if she would be willing to write down what she saw, just in case this ever went beyond gossip. She agreed. She said she had been bothered by the way my sisters had twisted the story and felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. She wrote a statement saying the boys had tried to push her first, that she overheard my sisters planning to film a funny video, that she had seen the boys swim in that pool many times. I talked to a couple of people who had been at the barbecue and saw how drunk my brothers-in-law were, how little attention anyone was paying to the kids. They did not want to get deeply involved, but they were willing to send texts confirming the basic facts. I saved those too. Around that time, my parents started opening up more about their finances, which had always been one of those weird topics nobody really wants to touch. It started with something small. My mother asked me to help her pay a bill online because the login was not working, and one thing led to another. Suddenly, I was staring at account balances that were much lower than I expected. "You do not have any savings?" I asked, trying not to sound judgmental. My father shrugged, embarrassed. "We have the house," he said. "And my pension. That is it." "What about retirement accounts?" I pushed. "Or anything else?" He shook his head. "We were never good with money," he admitted. "We helped where we could. We thought there would be time to catch up." I knew what "helped where we could" meant. It meant my sisters. It meant bailing them out of late rent and credit card bills and spontaneous vacations that somehow always counted as family emergencies. I had heard little pieces over the years, but I had never seen the full picture. Seeing the actual numbers made my stomach twist. They had always assumed there was some big safety net waiting for them when our parents died. They talked about it openly, honestly. They would say things like, "When the house sells, we will finally be able to pay off these cards." Like that was a natural, acceptable plan. They never asked if there would even be a house to sell. They just assumed the money existed because it needed to. Sitting at my parents' kitchen table, looking at those balances, I realized something very clearly. There was no fortune. There was a modest house, a pension, and a little social security. That was it. The fantasy my sisters had built their future on was just that, a fantasy. It made their accusations about me stealing their inheritance feel even more insulting, because there was nothing to steal. It was not really about the money. It was about control and about who they could paint as the villain when reality did not match their expectations. Not long after that, my parents brought up something I had been half expecting and half dreading. "We want to get our paperwork in order," my father said one evening, pushing a folder toward me on the table, "while we still can." Inside the folder were brochures about basic legal documents: wills, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney. It was one of those things people talk about doing and never actually do until it is too late. My parents were scared, and they were trying for once to be proactive. "We want you to be the one who makes decisions if we cannot," my mother said, her voice soft. "You are here. You know our doctors. You help with the insurance. It just makes sense." My initial reaction was to say no, not because I did not want to help them, but because I could already hear my sisters screaming about it. I pictured them using the words manipulation and abuse and exploiting the elderly, and wanted to crawl out of my own skin. But then I looked at my parents. They looked so small, sitting there at the table with their papers, and their hope that someone would protect them if their bodies or minds started failing. "Okay," I said finally. "I will do it. But you have to understand, this is going to make them even angrier, and I cannot control that." "We know," my father said. "We also know they will not show up for doctor visits or pay the property taxes or sit on hold with the insurance company for an hour. You will. You already do." We went to an office a couple of weeks later, signed some documents, and made everything official. The wills, the basic ones they had done years earlier, already divided the house equally between the three of us. I made sure they stayed that way. I refused to let them change anything about the inheritance, not because I wanted to share with my sisters, but because I knew any change would become a weapon. When my parents told my sisters about the power of attorney, they did it in a group setting, trying to be transparent. They explained that all they had done was put someone in place to handle things if they became incapable. They said the will had not changed. My sisters lost their minds. They accused my parents of letting me take over. They said words like brainwashing and gaslighting, like they had just discovered a list of internet buzzwords and were determined to use them all. They told my parents they were too old to be making these kinds of decisions, and implied that I had forced them. At one point, my older sister actually said, "This is financial abuse. This is exactly what they talk about in those articles about elder exploitation." 2 days later, someone from a protective services agency called my parents to ask if they were okay. My father told me about the call afterward, his hands shaking with anger. "They actually reported us," he said. Us. Their own parents. I asked what he had told the person on the phone. "I told them the truth," he said. "That we are fine. That we chose you because you actually care. That our other daughters are just angry there is not a giant pot of gold waiting for them." The investigation, if you could even call it that, was brief. Someone came by, asked a few questions, looked at the paperwork, and left. There was nothing to find. My parents were lucid, their documents were in order, and there was no evidence of anything except 2 grown women throwing tantrums because life did not match their expectations. But the stress of it, the idea that strangers might show up and judge them in their own home because of their own children, took a toll. My mother's blood pressure shot up. She started having panic attacks at night, waking up thinking someone was going to break down the door. My father, who had always been stoic, started pacing the house long after dark, staring out the window like he was waiting for something else to fall apart. It all came to a head the night my mother ended up in the hospital. She had been feeling off all day, tired and out of breath just walking from the kitchen to the living room. My father called me, his voice tight, and asked if I could come over. By the time I got there, my mother was clutching her chest, sweating, gasping. We called an ambulance. It was all a blur after that. Bright lights, questions, monitors, hard plastic chairs in the emergency room. They admitted her with serious heart issues, the kind of diagnosis where the doctors use words like risk and complications, and everyone nods and pretends they are not terrified. For the first couple of days, my father and I took turns sitting by her bed. She would drift in and out, holding my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. We tried to keep things calm, to talk about safe topics, to give her some sense of normal. Then my sisters showed up. They came together like a storm front carrying flowers and fake concern. At first, I actually let myself hope that maybe the reality of our mother lying in a hospital bed with tubes in her arms would snap them out of whatever story they had been following. Maybe they would see what really mattered. No. They waited until my father stepped out to talk to a nurse. They smiled at my mother, patted her hand, and then turned to me. "So," my older sister said, voice low, "what exactly have you had them sign while she has been like this?" My mother's eyes flew wide. "Excuse me?" she whispered. "You heard me," my sister continued. "Power of attorney, changes to the will, giving you the house early. What did you rush them into while she was too sick to understand?" I felt something snap in me. "Nothing," I said, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "We signed the power of attorney weeks ago when she was fine. The will has not changed. Stop trying to turn this into a courtroom drama. Our mother is lying there with wires glued to her chest and all you can think about is paperwork?" My younger sister crossed her arms. "We just want to make sure you are not taking advantage," she said. "You have a history of twisting things." I could see my mother's heart monitor beeping faster. Her breathing was changing, her hands were shaking. "Get out," I said, standing up. "Both of you, right now. We have every right to be here." My older sister snapped back. "Then act like it," I said. "Shut up or leave. She does not need this." Right on cue, a nurse came in, saw the chaos, and basically backed me up. She said my mother needed rest and that there should be as little stress as possible in the room. My sisters huffed and puffed, said they were being pushed out again, and finally left, promising they would be talking to a lawyer about this. Not even 20 minutes after they were gone, my mother had a full-blown panic attack. Her heart rate shot up. The alarms went off. Nurses and doctors rushed in. My father came back to the room to find them giving her medication, adjusting her oxygen. He looked from her to me, and I could see the question in his eyes without him saying it. Did they do this? Yes, they did. She never fully bounced back after that. She was in and out of the hospital for months, each stay chipping away at her strength. Every time we thought she was stable, something else would go wrong. Through it all, my sisters managed to make everything about themselves. They complained about being left out of updates while simultaneously ignoring calls from my father. They showed up unannounced and made scenes. They cried loudly in waiting rooms for maximum audience. 6 months later, she died. It was in her sleep. At home, my father found her. He called me first, voice broken in a way I had never heard. I threw on whatever clothes were closest. My husband drove us over, and the whole morning passed in a blur of sirens and paperwork and quiet neighbors standing in their yards pretending they were not listening. The funeral happened a few days later. I do not remember most of it. I remember the smell of flowers, the feel of my father's hand gripping mine so tightly my fingers went numb again, the way my sisters kept drifting in and out of the small room, accepting hugs and condolences like they were celebrities attending a premiere. What I remember very clearly, like it was recorded in high definition in my brain, is what they talked about at the reception afterward. Not memories, not stories about our mother, not regrets. The house. They waited until most people had left and then cornered my father at one of the tables. "So," my older sister said, setting down her cup, "when are we going to sit down and talk about the house and the rest of the estate?" I almost dropped my plate. My father blinked at her. "Your mother has not even been buried a full day," he said. "Can we not talk about this now?" "We have to plan," my younger sister insisted. "There are 3 of us. We need to know who is getting what." I saw a couple of relatives nearby look over, their faces tightening. The air in the room changed. It was like someone had cracked a window and let in a cold wind. "We will handle everything when we are ready," my father said, his voice going flat in that way it did when he was done arguing. Not today. They dropped it in the moment, but they did not let it go. In the days after the funeral, they started showing up at the house with boxes. They would walk in, hug my father, and then start claiming things. Mom would have wanted me to have this, they said. Hauling away framed pictures, pieces of furniture, jewelry from the little dish on my mother's dresser. They did not ask. They just informed. My father, drowning in grief and paperwork and empty rooms, did not have the energy to fight. Sometimes he would call me after they left, his voice shaky, and tell me what they had taken. I would bite my tongue until it hurt because the last thing he needed was another battle. Eventually, though, there had to be a formal conversation. The will had to be read. The house, modest as it was, had to be dealt with. My father suggested we all meet at the house one Saturday when a lawyer friend of his could call in and walk us through the basics. He warned me ahead of time that it might get ugly. I told him I would be there anyway. Ugly does not even begin to cover it. From the moment my sisters walked in, they were in attack mode. They sat down at the dining table, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, like this was some kind of reality show reunion. My father had the will in front of him, a few bank statements, a notepad. I had a folder with the power of attorney documents and some basic info just in case. The lawyer came on the screen of my father's laptop and started reading the will. It was simple, just like I knew it would be. Everything split 3 ways. The house to be sold and the proceeds divided. No secret accounts. No favorite child clauses. My mother had signed it more than a decade earlier, long before the pool, long before the health issues. My sisters flipped. That cannot be right, my older sister said. You told us there was more. More what? My father asked, genuinely confused. More money, my younger sister said. Savings, investments, something. You cannot tell us you worked all those years and there is nothing, he sighed. There is my pension, he said, and Social Security. That is for me to live on. The house is the only real asset to split. You know that. They did not want to know that. They wanted to believe there was some conspiracy. She changed this recently, did she not? My older sister demanded. Under pressure, when she was sick, you let her sign things when she was not in her right mind. The lawyer, bless him, was not having it. He calmly pointed out the dates on the documents. He confirmed that my mother had been in good health when she signed the will. He explained that the power of attorney did not transfer ownership of anything. It just allowed someone to make decisions if they were incapacitated. He said every phrase slowly, like he was talking to children. They ignored him. She always loved you more, my younger sister said, turning to me. She probably left you something else on the side. Some hidden account. Jewelry. Something. If there was anything like that, I said, feeling my patience unravel, it would be in there. It is not. There is no secret stash. There is just this house and a lifetime of bills. That was when my father, who had been sitting there quietly taking the hits, finally spoke up. There is one more thing we need to talk about, he said. Since you are so concerned about who got what. He pulled out a different folder, one I had not seen before. He opened it and laid out some papers on the table. 3 years ago, he began, looking directly at my older sister, we lent you $15,000. The room went very still. You told us you needed it for a medical emergency, he continued. You promised you would pay it back. You have not paid a single dollar. My older sister's face went through about 3 different shades. We needed that money, she said. You offered. It was not a loan, it was help. It was a loan, my father said. We have it in writing. He tapped the paper. My younger sister jumped in to defend her. You always helped her, she said. You could afford it. What does that have to do with anything? It has to do with the fact that you have both been taking from us for years, my father replied, his voice finally rising. You think there is some big inheritance because you already spent it in your heads. Meanwhile, your sister here, he jerked his chin toward me, has not asked us for a single dollar since she moved out. She has been helping us pay bills. She has been driving us to appointments. She has been cleaning this house while you take furniture out of it. He pulled out more papers. Bank statements, records of transfers, notes scribbled in my mother's handwriting. These, he said, are the monthly deposits we have been making into your accounts. For almost 20 years. $500 here, $500 there. Do you know how much that adds up to? They did not answer. They did not need to. I could see the number at the bottom of his handwritten list. It was sickening. You have each received well over $100,000 from us, my father said. his voice shaking with a mix of fury and heartbreak. "Over the years, at your request, because you said you were struggling, because you could not control your spending, we gave and gave and gave. Do you know how much your sister has received from us in the same time?" He looked at me, and I shook my head because I honestly did not know. I had never thought about it in those terms. "Nothing," he said, "unless you count the occasional dinner and the tank of gas she refused to let me pay her back for." My sisters started protesting. Obviously. They said the money had been gifts. They said good parents help their kids. They said we were shaming them for being honest about needing help, which was a wild take considering the amount of dishonest manipulation that had gone into those requests. They tried to shift the conversation back to the house again, saying they were being punished for not being perfect, like me. But it was too late. The truth was out of the folder and on the table. The lawyer, who had mostly been observing by that point, cleared his throat and said something about how the estate would be divided according to the will, and any outstanding debts could be accounted for if my father chose. He said it all politely, but the message was clear. My sisters had already gotten far more than their share. Word got around, like it always does in families. Not from me. I did not say anything to anyone that was not already in that room, but people talk. My father vented to his brother, who told his wife, who told her kids, who mentioned it to someone else. Pretty soon, the story of my sisters demanding inheritance money after bleeding my parents dry for decades was the new whispered topic at family gatherings. The universe has this annoying habit of not giving you the satisfaction you imagine when you think about karma. There was no big dramatic moment where they were dragged out of a party in handcuffs while everyone clapped. What happened was slower, quieter, more like erosion. My older sister's marriage crumbled. Her husband filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, which is legal code for "I am tired of living in a storm." She had to declare bankruptcy when the bills finally crushed her. The car she loved got repossessed. She had to move into a smaller rental in a part of town she used to make fun of. My younger sister lost her spot in one of her social circles when people who had been at the funeral and the will reading started connecting dots. The same women who had once commented, "You are such a great mom," on her posts now kept their distance. She was removed from a volunteer position at church after enough people complained about her behavior toward my parents. Officially, it was about conflict, but everyone knew. Screenshots of their earlier posts about dangerous relatives who hurt kids started resurfacing quietly when people told the real story. They looked different when you knew they were written by the same women who had siphoned money from their parents for years and then attacked the one child who refused to play along. Through all of this, I did not run some secret revenge campaign. I did not send anonymous messages. I did not create fake profiles to expose them. I was tired. So tired. All I did was stop covering for them. When people asked what happened, I told them the truth in simple terms. No embellishments, no drama, just facts. 2 years after my mother's death, life looks very different. My father sold the house. It was too big, too full of ghosts, too much for him to handle alone. He moved into a smaller apartment about 15 minutes from me and my husband. It has an elevator, a little balcony, and no stairs to fall down at 3 in the morning. We helped him pick out new furniture. Simple, comfortable things that were his, not leftovers from the old life. We see him several times a week now. Sometimes he comes over for dinner. Sometimes we go to his place and watch a movie or help him with paperwork. He still misses my mother every day. Some nights he talks about her so much the words spill over. Other nights he sits quietly and stares at the blank television screen, and I know he is replaying the last few years and wondering how his family ended up like this. My sisters barely visit him. He does not chase them. They call when they need something, and sometimes he picks up. Sometimes he does not. He has learned, finally, that answering every call does not make him a better father. It just makes him an easier target. On paper, I am the one with the power now. My name is on the documents as the person who will decide things if he cannot. In reality, he still runs his own life. I am just the backup plan. But that piece of paper has given him something he did not have before: the freedom to say no. He tells my sisters when they do call that if they have questions about the house or the money, they should talk to me. They never do. I started therapy right after my mother died and never stopped. At first, I thought I would go for a few sessions, get some tools, and be done. Instead, I ended up slowly unpacking decades of being cast as the responsible one, the reasonable one, the one who had to absorb everyone else's chaos. My therapist helped me see patterns I had been swimming in my whole life. The way my sisters rewrote history whenever it suited them. The way my parents, especially my mother, would ask me to be the bigger person every time to keep the peace. The way I had been taught, without anyone saying it out loud, that my feelings were less important than keeping the family from exploding. We talked about the pool, obviously, but also about birthdays where my sisters forgot to show up, holidays where they dominated the events with their drama, countless moments where I swallowed my anger because speaking up would have made me the problem. One day in therapy, I said something I had never said out loud before. I think they always hated me a little bit. It felt horrible to say. It also felt true. Not hated in the, we want you dead way. Hated in the, you are a mirror we cannot stand way. I had done the boring, unglamorous work of growing up. I had paid my own bills, kept my life small enough to manage, stayed close enough to our parents to actually see what was happening. They had chased the illusion of a lifestyle. When reality showed up, they needed someone to blame. A few months ago, the neighbor from the barbecue, you remember, the one they tried to push in the pool before me, slipped a card into my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note. She apologized for not speaking up sooner, for staying quiet when she saw the posts, for not defending me more publicly. She wrote about how scared she had been that day, about how she had almost fallen, about how she had watched my sisters twist the story into something unrecognizable. I should have said more, she wrote. I am saying it now. You did nothing wrong. I am so sorry for what they put you through. I cried when I finished reading it, not because I needed her validation to know I was not the villain, but because it was the first time someone outside my little circle of my husband and my therapist actually said it out loud. Around the same time, one of my former brothers-in-law asked if he could meet me for coffee. I considered saying no, but curiosity won. We sat at a table in a quiet corner of a coffee shop. Two people who used to be family, and now were just two people. He apologized. For the phones, for showing up at my house, for standing there while my sisters called me names. He said he had been wrapped up in the drama, in the alcohol, in the idea that if he backed me, he would be exiled from his own family. He said he regretted it every day. They talked about you all the time, he admitted. Anytime something went wrong, it was, she thinks she is better than us. Or, of course she would not understand. Her life is easy. They made you into this symbol of everything they did not have. And it was easier to hate you than to admit they were making bad decisions. Hearing it did not hurt as much as I thought it would. It was like finally getting subtitles for a movie I have watched my whole life with the sound slightly off. I am not going to tell you I forgave them. I did not. Not fully. Maybe I never will. I am not going to pretend I have turned all of this into some neat little lesson about family and resilience and forgiveness. This is not one of those stories. Here is what I did instead. I put up walls. Not the kind that keep everyone out, but the kind with doors that lock from my side. I stopped going to every family event just because I was invited. I stopped answering calls that came after midnight. I stopped explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. And no, I never paid a cent for those phones. I built a life that is smaller and quieter and, honestly, kinder. Dinner with my father, movie nights with my husband, walks around our neighborhood where nobody knows me as that aunt from the pool story. I learned how to sit in silence without feeling like I needed to fill it with excuses. Sometimes, late at night, my brain still replays the barbecue in high definition. The kids running, the splash, the screaming, my sister's faces twisted with anger and something uglier underneath. I used to think if I could just explain it one more time, send one more text, have one more conversation, I could fix it. I do not think that anymore. Now, when the scene starts, I picture it a little differently. I imagine the moment before the boys reached me, the second where I could see exactly what was about to happen. I see myself stepping aside, not just by the pool, but in the bigger sense, stepping out of the line of fire, refusing to be the impact point for their chaos. They still tell their version of the story, I am sure. Somewhere out there, I am still the villain in their script. I have stopped auditioning for that role. If you are waiting for me to say I have made peace with it, I do not know if that is true. What I have made is distance. And sometimes distance is the only kind of peace you can get from people who would rather drown you in their story than admit they jumped in the deep end on their own.